I'm serious.
Check.
We had a board meeting
Okay.
today, and I was like,
We are live and our mics are now on. I apologize to everybody for the delay. And once my screen comes up here, Mr. Mayor, we are ready to proceed.
thank you, Mr. Manager. I'll call the Riverside City Council meeting for Thursday, November 7th, 2024 to order at 6:05 PM. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Brown?
Here.
Mr. Denning?
Here.
Ms. Fry?
Here.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Ms. Lomach?
Yes.
Mr. Maxfield?
Present.
Mayor Williams?
Here. No absent council members. Mr. Manager, I believe that we were going to move something on the agenda so that we gave people an opportunity to speak on agenda items prior to our presentation.
Yes, the only suggestion I would have is to switch items 8 and 9 so that, items 8 and 10 to put public comment on agenda items immediately after the presentation. That would just, for continuity's sake.
Yes.
And then to proceed with the agenda from there.
Move to approve as amended. Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Joseph and a second from Mr. Brown to approve the agenda as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Agenda is approved. If you're able to, please join me and rise to pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, and we have some guests with us tonight. We are going to welcome to the podium some folks from CCA, which is our income tax collection agency. Is that a good way to
Correct.
describe our friends? So, Mr. Manager, I'll turn it over to you to introduce and welcome our guests from CCA.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to welcome Michelle Jordan and Eric Hine with CCA. They're here just to provide a bit of an update on the services that CCA provides to all of us and answer any questions that folks on council may have. I do just want to gently remind folks that because income taxes are a sensitive issue and the data that is involved in that is protected by law, we are not permitted, and CCA is not permitted to comment on anybody's individual tax circumstances this evening. And so, to the extent that these issues may come up in public comment, we can certainly listen and take people's contact information, but we can't really get into any kind of a dialogue about individual cases here this evening. But Michelle and Eric, feel free to come on up. I'll load up a PowerPoint for you here as well.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and City Manager, and clerk. Thanks for having us here today, and thank you again, residents, for being here to hear us talk with you guys. My name's Eric Hine. I'm with CCA.
Could you pull the mic up?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Eric, just
Sure.
there you go.
My name's Eric Hine. I'm with CCA. I've been with CCA since about 2017. I've been in the tax professional since for about 20 years now.
And my name is Michelle Jordan. I've been with CCA since 2011, and this is my 44th year of municipal income tax.
We got a slide up here. So we offer various types of services. I personally myself offer the taxpayer assistance here at the City of Riverside. If you've seen me here on a weekday during tax season in the conference room, I'm here helping taxpayers that'll come in and set up appointments. So that's always welcome. Everybody uses that it's always full. There's always appointments all the time. There's also what we've created since COVID was prepare my return type of form to help people out because not everybody knows how to fill out their forms. So the form is really simple. Just fill out your name, your address, your contact information, and most importantly, a contact phone number so that when we're preparing the return, and they just basically attach their W-2s. And Michelle here is the expert at doing those returns and getting those back and turning them around real quick. And then it kind of lets them know what their balance is, if they owe any taxes or if they're all good. It sets them up with estimates and all that good stuff.
This is the form that we provide on our website, but we also make sure that there's a stack of them here at the city building during tax season. And residents can come in, just basically fill out the top part of this, check off everything that they're attaching, whether it's W-2s, if they're self-employed, they may have a Schedule C. If they own rental property, they may have a Schedule E. They just check the box of everything they've attached. On a weekly basis, I come by and I pick up all of these documents and prepare the returns, send back copies to the residents, along with a billing statement if they owe anything, setting up estimates, giving them a letter of explanation so that they have everything. We make sure we get a phone number because when I'm doing these, if I have a question, I will just pick up the phone and call someone, as opposed to sending a letter asking for things. It's so much easier just to be able to pick up the phone and talk to somebody and make sure that we have everything that we need so that I can complete the return for them. Like Eric said, because of COVID, we had to really change how we delivered service. So this is something that we started doing during COVID, and it's extended beyond that because people appreciate not having to take time off of work to come in even for an appointment. They can drop things off at their convenience, and then I can call them and we can work through any questions that I might have. Last year, between Riverside, Clayton, Union, West Milton, and Germantown, I did close to 900 of these. So it's a service that's definitely being used by your residents.
We've got an e-file system that everybody can use. It's convenient. We've updated it to be more friendly. Taxpayers can file their return online. Currently, it's limited to what you can file online because of the complexity of some returns. So it'll put you through a little questionnaire as to whether you can file electronically or not. You can also make your payments electronically. That's used quite often. And taxpayers can pay by credit card. There's no fees for paying over the phone by a credit card. Taxpayers also have access to their estimates and their credits on the website from the prior year. They can call the call center. Auditors will answer the questions for them. We get a lot of calls from taxpayers, preparers, asking, hey, what's my customer or my tax client's estimates and credits? And so that helps eliminate a lot of issues where the CPA or tax preparer assumes that the tax payer made estimates and maybe they didn't. And so what happens sometimes is taxpayers will not make estimates and there'll be a difference for what the preparer prepared a return for. So what happens is maybe they get correspondence saying, hey, we didn't have the estimates that you claimed on your return.
Yeah, if you pull that mic a
Okay.
little closer, you might actually take it out.
Okay. Let's go up there a little higher.
There you go.
Did you say that they could see their estimates on the website?
Yes, they can log in using their social security number and having an account set up. They can check and see how much they've made in estimated tax payments. That's really helpful because sometimes most of us will do this. We get online and we do things at night after work when we have time to do those things. So if somebody's working on their tax return, they can't remember how much they paid, or they think they had a prior credit and they don't remember what that is, they can log in and see that information so that they can finish preparing their return or get that information to their preparer quickly.
Next slide here, that's my phone number, work number, Michelle's work number. We both live here in the Dayton area, and we take a lot of phone calls for, like if you have a customer or resident that has a question and says, hey, I don't understand this tax bill, they can always call Michelle or myself. Please refer them to us. We help resolve all those issues all the time.
Okay, the next slide is a little bit more about what governs municipal income tax. For those of you who have been around long enough to know about House Bill 5 and the sweeping changes that happened to municipal income tax about 10 years ago, Ohio Revised Code Section 718 governs municipal income tax. It is the document, it is the law that decides how we can administer the tax, what we can tax, when the due dates are. And very specifically, during that bill process, they added a new section, and that's Ohio Revised Code Section 718.04, and it provides the requirements for a municipal corporation to administer the tax. And it also specifically states that nothing in this chapter authorizes a municipal corporation to levy a tax on income or to administer or collect such a tax or penalties or interest related to such a tax contrary to the provisions and limitations specified in this chapter. So basically, we have to follow 718. No matter who administers the municipal income tax, whether you were to bring it in-house, have another agency or a municipality collect the tax, all of the rules would be the same. They cannot deviate from 718. So we're going to go through a few of the things that are dictated in 718, just so that you understand the exact process that we have to follow. When is the municipal income tax return due? You would think it would be as simple, it's due by April the 15th, but it can't quite be that simple. 718.05G1A says that the return is required to be completed and filed on or before the date prescribed for the filing of the state individual income tax return. So if there is a change to the state filing due date, and you might remember in the last several years there have been some changes to that date because of the Emancipation Day holiday in D.C., which is where the IRS offices are located, that the due date was extended to maybe the 17th or the 18th in prior years. So once the IRS determines the due date for the federal, the state determines the due date for the state, then we can announce the due date for the city return. If a taxpayer has filed a federal extension, when is the tax due? 718.05G2A says that if a taxpayer has requested an automatic 6-month extension for filing the federal return, that they automatically have a 6-month extension for the filing of the municipal income tax return. Important to note, if they do have an extension, it's important that when they file that return with us, they attach a copy of the extension so that we know that the return was received after the original due date because of an extension. But when is the tax actually due? 718.05G2C, an extension of time to file is not an extension of the time to pay any tax due. So if a taxpayer had a balance due, just as if they were filing their federal extension, they still have to make payment with the extension by that due date. If a taxpayer has a balance due for municipal purposes, they would still have to have that paid by the due dates as prescribed. The extension just extends the paperwork, not the payment. Who is required to file a return? And this is from your ordinance. An annual municipality income tax return shall be completed and filed by every individual taxpayer and any taxpayer that is not an individual for each taxable year for which the taxpayer is subject to the tax, whether or not a tax is due thereon. That's what we commonly refer to as mandatory filing. All residents are required to file a return regardless of whether or not they actually have the balance due. And something that changed recently in the revised code, a municipality could decide to tax anybody at any age if they had earned income. Or some municipalities tax them starting at 16, some at 17. But there's now uniformity of this, starting with tax year 2023, the age is 18. Anybody who's 18 years and older is required to file a return.
So what documentation is required to file your return with the city of Riverside? We need all W-2s showing your wages reported. It's important that the W-2 includes your municipal income tax that's withheld for other cities or your own city that you live in. Often we get returns that have multiple W-2s. Often we have returns with multiple W-2s, and there may be a W-2 missing that doesn't show maybe the Riverside withholding tax or another municipality. So often taxpayers will get correspondence due to that situation. For a refund, any documentation necessary to support the refund request. It's important that taxpayers submit all documentation to get a refund timely. After taxpayers filed a return, the tax administrator may request and the taxpayer shall provide any information, statements, or documents required by the municipal corporation to determine and verify the taxpayer's municipal income tax.
And if I could give an example of when this is really important, if you have a resident who moves in during the year and they've indicated a move-in date, but maybe they have 3 or 4 different employers during that year. It's important for us to know which incomes are reportable on the Riverside return, and if some of that has to be prorated. So that's when we may go back and say, please give us the dates that you worked at each of these employers so that we can figure out which income is reportable. If you have pay stubs closest to those dates, that's even better. But those are the kind of situations where once a return is filed, if they've provided everything that they thought they needed to, but we need more information because we certainly don't want to include income that should not be included on that return. So we may ask them for additional clarification, especially for a part-year resident.
When is estimated tax due? Oh, you already turned it. So am I required to make a estimated tax payments? The tax ordinance states that every taxpayer shall make a declaration of estimated taxes for the current taxable year if the amount payable as estimated taxes is at least $200.
And this is outlined in Ohio Revised Code Section 718.08. This is a requirement for all cities and villages in Ohio. This is not just a Riverside requirement. It's in your ordinance because it's in 718. But the requirement and the limitations are the same for all cities and villages in Ohio with the municipal income tax.
So often, there's a distinction between estimated tax bill, which will be a blue bill, and like the delinquent tax bill, which will be a red bill. So often I'll get a call saying, hey, I got this bill, I don't understand why I got this. It's an estimate. The first thing I usually ask is it a blue bill or a red bill? And they say it's a blue. And I was like, that's your estimate. Your accountant set up estimates for you. You know, maybe they weren't aware of that. And so then they say, oh, okay, because they think that they already paid the taxes. The required portion of the tax liability that shall be paid through estimated tax payments shall be as follows. First quarter, on or before the 15th day of the 4th month. Second quarter, on or before the 15th day of the 6th month. Third quarter, the 9th month. Fourth quarter, the first month of January, 15th of January.
Now, we're going to discuss when penalty and interest is assessed for underpayment of estimated tax. And again, this is part of the Ohio Revised Code, Section 718.08. In case of any underpayment, penalty and interest may be imposed unless the underpayment is due to reasonable cause as described in Division E of this section, and we'll talk about those exceptions next. So anybody who doesn't make estimated tax payments and doesn't have them paid timely is subject to penalty and interest for underpayment of estimate. In the Revised Code, there are some exceptions that are set up. And these are the same as the exceptions for federal and state purposes also. The exceptions are, first of all, if you've paid at least 90% of your liability for the current year and it's timely paid. The second exception, and this is for taxpayers who don't know for sure what they're going to owe, this is the one we tell them that they should follow. If they pay an amount equal to 100% of what they owed in the prior year, and that prior year had to be a full 12-month period, and the taxes had to be timely paid, then even if they owed thousands of dollars more in estimate for the current year, they've met what's called safe harbor. They've paid an amount equal to what they owed in the prior year. So for a resident who maybe owns a business or has rental property or has really sporadic income and they don't know if they're going to be getting a bonus or not, and the timing of that can cause some problems for them, safe harbor is what we recommend that they do. That way they're not subject to any penalty and interest because they paid an amount equal to what they owed in the prior tax year. So that's the fail-safe, that's the safe harbor. The third exemption is if the taxpayer did not live in the municipal corporation on January 1st. If they weren't here January 1st, they weren't a full year resident. So they are not required to make estimates in that first year that they moved in because they were not here on January the 1st. Another question we get a lot is how do we determine the date that a document or a payment is received? There seems to be some concern about if something sits on a desk and it doesn't get processed for a week and it's past the deadline, are we assessing penalty because that's the date we worked on it? And that's absolutely not true. The Ohio Revised Code Section 718.05 prescribes that anything that's received after the prescribed payment due date or the document due date, we have to follow the postmark stamp on the cover of that envelope. We scan and we keep all envelopes that come in. So if something is received after the due date and it is subject to penalty and interest, we have the documentation to support penalty and interest that may be assessed. If a payment is made by electronic funds transfer, the payment is considered to be made on the date of the timestamp assigned by the first electronic system that received that payment. What are the penalty and interest rates? ORC 718.27 prescribes the late filing penalty, late payment penalty, and interest rates that all municipalities are bound to follow. The late filing penalty, prior to taxable year 2023, the revised code provided that the penalty for late filing is $25 per month, not to exceed a maximum of $150. That's still in play for returns that were required to be filed for tax years 2022 and earlier. Starting with taxable year 2023, the late filing penalty is a flat $25. The late payment penalty, and whether this is for unpaid tax or unpaid estimated or underpaid estimated tax, the penalty is 15% of the amount that was not timely paid. Interest is the federal short-term rate rounded to the nearest whole number percent plus 5%, and that's applied per annum. Municipalities are required to post this rate on their website annually. The rate is determined based on the federal short-term rate as of July, and by October 31st, the rate has to be published so that the public is aware of what that rate's going to be. For this year, it was 10%.
Next question we often get is, what can cause delays in returns or payment processing? This includes, but it is not limited to, the volume of the tax season, USPS service, lockbox, bank services, et cetera. Returns and payments sent to the wrong address. CCA has separate PO boxes for payments due, or returns with a payment, returns with no payment, and returns with a refund request. What happens, I see often, is preparers just give out tax preparer pre-printed envelope, and often it's just the no balance due address. And when that happens, the payment goes to the non-balance or non-payment lockbox. And what happens with that lockbox is not a priority because the priority is the returns with the money. We have to get the money into the bank. So often, after all the money gets processed during the busy time of season, we start to go through the ones that have no balance due. And then we see that there's a return with a check in it. So that's how a month, 2 months could go by that a check doesn't get processed.
And one of the things we do to try and make sure that they know what those post office boxes are is in the instructions that we have, and this is also online, we have a place where we designate which PO box should be used. It's similar to what the IRS and the state do. If you look at your returns, if you're sending money in with the filing of a state or a federal return, they have you send it to one box. If you're sending something in without payment, it goes to a different box. We've taken that one step further, too. We also have a separate box for refunds because refunds are a priority, the same as balances that come in. So those are all processed first. In case they didn't see the instruction booklet, it's at the bottom of every one of the forms, whether it's pre-printed or something that they pull offline. It gives them the breakdown of those addresses so that we can make sure that they come to the right location. If they get a packet, and we always provide boxes of packets here at the city building, we include an envelope that has stickers that they can put on the front, designating whether it's return with payment, return that has a refund, or it has no payment with it.
Returns or payments received with no documentation can also be a delay. Returns or payments sent to the wrong agency or municipality. I've seen that. I've seen Riverside returns sent to Huber Heights. I've seen them sent to Riverside or Rita, and then we get them back maybe with some correspondence that we may send out to a taxpayer saying, hey, our records indicate that there's no tax filing for this year. And they say, well, we did file our return. They contact their preparer, and the preparer sends a letter to us saying, hey, my bad, I sent this to the wrong agency. What we do is we do recognize the date that they filed the return with the wrong agency, so they're not penalized for filing it late. So But those are things that happen often. Where am I at here? This one? Returns or payments received without complete documentation. That makes it really difficult to file the return and accept it as correct. If there's information missing in the return that supports the withholding payments that they've claimed on their return, that can become an issue. What typically happens is the auditor will send out a letter saying, hey, we were missing documentation. Here's the balance due. Without that supporting documentation, such as the W-2, and you can send that back in, and we'll make a correction to the return with the additional supporting documentation. So everything can be resolved typically. If you get correspondence, it's just, call Michelle or myself, let us know. We look at your account and say, hey, this is what's missing, or what's the issue with the thing, and we do resolve like pretty much everything.
And
There's-
one thing that we do have here in the Dayton area, because Eric and I work so closely with your community and with other communities in this region, we have a PO box here in the Dayton area. So rather than send things up to Cleveland that we can resolve for them quickly, we have them send it directly to us so that we can take care of it. To the next one, yeah. I'm going to grab a tissue.
Common compliance challenges. A very common one is the wrong wage figure used on the form, W-2. Municipal tax always uses box 5, the Medicare wages. Often tax returns come in using box 1, which is reduced, is the amount reduced by their 401k contributions and other deductions. So that'll create correspondence back to the taxpayer saying, hey, you owe additional taxes. That's a very, very common. Returns, we receive returns without payments. I'm not sure I understand why. Maybe they just don't have the money at the time to do it, and they want to file on time, which is good. It's best to do that. Or they sometimes forget to send in a payment. That often happens too. The other option I've seen is they'll send in the return and they'll make a payment online. And so it needs to get cross-referenced and noticed. Let's see, deferred items not included in taxable income. That's what we just talked about. Oops.
Yep.
W-2 remitted shows local tax withheld, but the locality is not identified on the W-2. The W-2 remitted shows multiple or many as local tax withheld, but no breakdown of each locality is provided.
We see a lot of those for people who work construction, maybe electrical contractors. They may work in 20 or 30 different communities in a year. And the W-2 will state either multiple or many. And their employer always gives them a breakdown of the different municipalities that were withheld, but sometimes they forget to give us that breakdown.
Credit for school tax withheld is taken on the return, which is not an allowable credit. Returns are received with missing documentation such as W-2s, Federal 1040, or schedules, or 1099s.
I can cover this one too.
Okay.
We kind of touched on this a little bit before about having a hard time identifying exactly where somebody lives. And this is back a couple of slides, Josh, I apologize. And I can tell you this from my own personal experience. I was a Riverside resident for many years. I was actually on your Board of Zoning Appeals. So I know the community well. I lived in Forest Ridge. I had a zip code of 45424, Dayton 45424. My kids went to Fairborn schools. The prefix on my phone number was a 236, which is identified as Huber Heights. But I know I was City of Riverside. There are a lot of people who are confused by where they are, if they're doing it based off of an address, and the preparers especially. The resident may know exactly where they live. They may know they're Riverside, but the preparer is doing the return, and they see Dayton 45424. They may do a Huber Heights return, or they may do a Dayton return. I did a little experiment. I went to zipdatamaps.com and did a search for Riverside zip codes. And it showed 45404, 14, 24, 31, 32, and 33. as Riverside. Then I went to the USPS website, and I did a search by Riverside, Ohio zip codes, and it said 45404, 45431. But then you can go in based on zip code, and it'll tell you which communities that zip code covers. If you look at 45424, it says it's Dayton or Huber Heights. 45431 is Dayton, Beaver Creek Township, or Riverside. 45414 is Dayton, 45404 is Dayton or Riverside. So there is even some conflicting information for residents out there to try and figure out exactly where they need to file. This is a very common issue that we see. And one of the things we did early on when we started administering your tax was we got a complete street listing of every address that's in your community so that our database is accurate and it has every address in there that we know we need to have. The problem is not all preparers know that and not all residents know that. So that part is very confusing for them. So in a lot of cases, that's where we see returns sent to a wrong jurisdiction. Okay.
Additional items were taxpayer earned income in a municipality with a rate less than the city of residence rate and did not make estimated tax payments. Taxpayer earned income in city with tax rate greater than the city of residence rate and took incorrect credit.
There are a few communities in the area, like Trotwood, which is 2.75%. And we have seen where people who are working in Trotwood have tried to take the full 2.75% and then show an overpayment or a refund request.
Taxpayer had other income listed on Federal 1040, but did not provide documentation to support or failed to include in reportable income. Taxpayer lived in city for less than the entire calendar year, but did not indicate move-in, move-out dates, or provide information to prorate income. Taxpayer or preparer does not complete the estimated tax portion of the return for the current year. The preparer completed the estimate for the taxpayer. Payments were not made, but preparer assumes they were made and takes credit for estimates on the annual return.
Some of the other things that we see that may not be included are gambling winnings. And with the changes that happened with the Ohio Revised Code 10 years ago, all gambling and lottery winnings are taxable. That used to be one of those issues where cities could make a decision, city by city, whether or not they were going to tax that income. But with that change that actually went into effect 1/1/16, all municipalities tax gambling and lottery winnings.
Other items are wages are reduced by a schedule loss, which is not allowable. Schedule C or Schedule C is not reported on the return. Return is received with the wrong copy of the W-2, which shows no local tax withholding, so no credit can be given. Taxpayer receives a refund of tax withheld for another city in error, but does not provide documentation. Credit is still claimed on the return.
And if I could add a comment about that, with the changes from COVID, we see a lot of people now who are working from home, or they have a hybrid situation where they're working from home and having to report to an office maybe 2 days a week, 3 days a week. In some cases, the withholding does not follow what it should be. So you may have an employer who is withholding Dayton tax because that taxpayer reports to Dayton 2 days a week. But they're withholding on all 5 days. So the taxpayer gets a refund of anything that was overpaid to the city of Dayton. But then they present a W-2 with their return that shows full Dayton tax withheld and no documentation to show that part of that money was received back as a refund. This is becoming a more common thing that we're seeing, especially with people who are working from home and in hybrid situations. So what's reported on the W-2 is not always necessarily accurate, since in many cases, taxpayers are going back and getting money back that was withheld in error by the employer.
And Michelle, I don't want to interrupt you or cut you off here too much. I know there's a handful of slides left, but I do want to be sensitive to time.
Okay.
Is there a, maybe a slide that we could kind of land on here? And
Absolutely.
just what we have left?
We have some information here about correspondence, and Eric kind of touched on that really quickly, so just really fast, I'll tell you. There are a couple of different types of billing statements that are sent out, and we've got a breakdown in here to explain what those are. When a taxpayer calls us, we immediately ask them which bill they received so that we can help them resolve whatever issue that they have. So this will tell you a little bit more about that correspondence. I'm going to go just to the important notes to remember. Any agency, municipality, or in-house tax administrator is bound to follow the laws as established in Ohio Revised Code Section 718 and the City of Riverside's tax ordinance. Those laws don't change based on who's collecting the tax. Pay preparers don't always complete the return correctly or remember to do the estimate. And that's a reality. The return may not be completed correctly because they don't know all of the information. They may not do the estimate because the client has said, I'm not going to pay it, or I don't think I'm going to owe it next year because my employer may start withholding. So there are many reasons why they may not do the estimate. Estimated tax payments are not prepayment of the tax due. Estimates are made as the income is earned. Both the IRS and the state of Ohio require estimated tax payments as well when you owe tax to them. We review every return for accuracy to make sure that they're correct. If we have to make corrections or changes, then we send correspondence to taxpayers when we need to get more information or if there's a bill that's due. And when adjustments are made because they have forgotten to send in documentation, they can submit that documentation and we can very quickly correct that and change the return based on that documentation. Probably the most important slide is the very last one. I tell people this all the time. The law is what tells taxpayers what they need to do. Our job is totally customer service oriented. Our job is to help taxpayers through that process, help them file returns, and help them be successful in that endeavor. So that's what we do. We have a call center that's staffed by auditors, and they can answer any question, take payments by phone. They can assist with all the online filing and payments. We have a website that has information available if you're sitting at home 11 o'clock at night in your pajamas and trying to file a return. There's a lot of good information on there. And then you've got Eric and I here in the Dayton area who can help your residents with any specific questions that they have or if there's anything that they need. Eric and I both brought a stack of our business cards, and we would love for you to take some of these with you so that if you have a resident who has a question, give them our card. Encourage them to call us because that's exactly why we're here. We want to help them with their situations and help them get things resolved. So that probably is the most important slide.
And I should tack on here too that CCA has graciously provided not just us, but I believe all of their municipal clients with some information that we have used to populate, and by we, I mean Ms. Llewellyn, our exceptionally talented communications manager, to populate a web page. So if folks go out to our website now, you will see a lot of the most relevant salient points that were discussed here this evening also available on our website with appropriate links back as well. With the main idea, of course, being that we are trying to be sure that this information is accessible to folks on demand whenever they need it, and that if as questions come up, they know who to email, who to call, and how to reach out to get help in the most effective way possible. So that is live. Folks can check that out as we speak. But happy to make some time available if council has any questions. I know that there's been a lot of chatter in the community about income taxes. The thing I think that's important to remember in that conversation is so much of this, I think, tends to be driven by ORC and the hoops that ORC makes everyone jump through, or all cities jump through when it comes to collections, penalties, those sorts of things. But having said that, I think the experience that we've had with CCA is in working with an agency that is doing its level best to try to meet our residents where they are and help address problems. But having said that, I don't want to dominate too much of the conversation, but if folks have questions, I know they're happy to answer this evening, and we'll also make sure that their contact information is available after this meeting as well.
All right. I know that at least a few of our council members do have some questions. And Mr. Joseph, I know you had a few.
Yeah.
Do you want to start off?
Yeah, so thank you all for coming out here. I know you didn't have to do this, and thank you for all the work that you do in the community. And I'll mention something that you said. You did 900 returns last year.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
That was in March and April.
in March and April. So in 2 months, you did 900 returns.
Mhm.
Now, that's a lot of work, and that's commendable that you did that. But what that tells me is that 900 people felt that themselves were not capable of doing their own local tax return. I mean, at the end of the day, like, the information needed to file your local income tax, it's not that much. How much did you make and what city did you make it in? I mean, and granted, it can be, like you said, there's complicated tax situations. You have your gambling winnings, self-employment or income, things of that nature. And usually if you're self-employed or you have rental income, you're probably like hiring an accountant
No,
to do your?
Just work for, work for an HVAC company that gives you.
Oh.
30
Hey,
W-2s.
Yeah, I mean, I worked
27
at,
different places that you were at.
I'm almost 30, but I've spent the last decade working in payroll and like finance. So very, very familiar with like a very long W-2, or several W-2s to capture all that income. But I mean, at the end of the day, the information's there. If you use an app like TurboTax, you can scan a picture of it and be done with, I think I did my federal tax return in 5 minutes this year, and I'm married. So the technology is there to do that. And I'm just wondering, based on CCA's 2021 financial statement, collected $9 million in revenue, so like fees from like municipalities or penalties. There was a $3 million net operating like gain there at the end of the year. I mean, has there been any talk about investing some of that surplus of $3.5 million into making technology available for our residents to be able to do this themselves? So you don't have to do 900 tax returns a year.
A couple of issues. Number one, we see a lot of the same residents who come back year after year after year. They may have multiple partnerships, they may have scheduled income, they may have prior year loss carry forwards, they may have 30 W-2s, or they may just have one W-2 and they want to hand it to somebody to do that for them. So we see a myriad of situations where people will come in to have that return done. As far as the financials for the city of Cleveland, we are actually a governmental entity. We are the city of Cleveland.
Right.
We are not a separate agency. We are the city of Cleveland. Any questions you have regarding those type of things probably won't come from Eric and I, because basically during the day, we are tax people.
Right.
We're preparing returns and helping taxpayers. Josh, that might be a better question for Kevin, but we have our own IT department, and we are constantly updating our website. We are constantly doing upgrades to make things easier and better for residents. We're bound by the same obstacles that any municipal government has when it comes to having the funding to do that. However, that's been a priority to improve the website, and we just went through a major overhaul of things last year.
Right.
And there are a list of things that are going to be added moving forward. So that's a major priority.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of what I've learned as a consultant is when you're building these types of products, right? When you're running an organization, a business, as CCA is a business, your product is your tax forms, the residents' ability to pay their taxes, right? And often the big kind of message here is that the product needs to be tailored to your audience. I'd say 99% of the community doesn't work in payroll, tax, accounting. These are your bakers, your welders, your pipe fitters, your base employees. They don't live in the same world that we're looking at tax forms all day. And it's advantageous of businesses like yours to tailor a product to that consumer so that my grandma can go on and take her W-2 and be able to easily understand the buttons that she needs to click to be able to file her local income tax return. Because then that's why, like, you asked the question, like, I don't know why these returns are sent without payment. Probably because the person didn't know they need to pay anything. So, like, I mean.
That's not true.
And those
it's-
returns come in actually showing balance dues and no payment included.
But, I mean, I'd ask anybody on this, in the community, if it's simple to file your local income tax return, I guarantee you I get a resounding no. So, I mean, it's not surprising that you get these kind of like you're surprised by it, but to me, it makes total sense.
We're not completely surprised by it, and my history of working with the Ohio Municipal League and the legislation that's come down the pike for municipal income tax, when the Ohio Revised Code, before it was updated this last time, it was maybe 30 pages long. It's now 162 pages long, and that was the state's version of uniformity and simplicity. They've made things much more complicated for preparers and for the everyday resident. If you go through and read the sections just on the where you have to pay if you're working from home, how a business has to allocate net profits, it's much more complicated than it used to be.
Right.
So it's changed dramatically.
But like I said before, the IRS tax law is, what, thousands of pages.
Exactly.
There's multiple publications. I have them printed all throughout my office.
I was around for Graham Rudman.
Right.
What
I mean-
happened in '86, that was the Paperwork Reduction Act that added
Yeah.
How
And then
many
you get
pages
things
to
that
the
happened,
code?
like the TCGA that happened in 2017, so you had to rework like how you do your calculations. But
Mm-hmm.
within a matter of, I don't know, the companies that I worked for, a month or two, we had prep time that the IRS came out and said, like, this is how your tax tables are going to change. They update it. And then, like, again, 1,000-page regulation, I filed my income tax on my phone in 5 minutes. Like, TurboTax is this little, like, speed thing, and you get a little timer that's going how quickly you can file your federal income tax. And I know that the technology's out there, and I know it's not the two of you, but the message to get out there is that it doesn't have to be this complicated.
When you're dealing with a municipal tax rate that's one rate, and you may be working in multiple jurisdictions that have different rates, or even in a non-taxing jurisdiction, that's where a lot of the complication comes for people who are preparing returns.
Right.
It's not necessarily that the code is difficult, or that even an online filing is difficult. It's that they're sitting there looking at multiple W-2s and don't know what to report because they have multiple places that they've worked. And those are the people who typically will ask for that assistance. And the 900 returns, that was over 5 different municipalities. You do have a lot of your residents who are filing online as well.
Yeah, and I have one last thing. So, like, how does CCA or other municipalities, how do they notify people that they owe income tax in the first place? Like, say a scenario, right? I'm an 18-year-old, I'm from Texas, and I got accepted to Wright State. Rent's expensive, so I need to get a job. So I go get a job in Beaver Creek. It's a township, not paying employment tax, but I live here in Riverside. So my boss, my company's not doing courtesy withholding, so my 2.5% isn't getting withheld from my check. Texas, my parents, the only thing that I've ever heard them talk about is federal taxes. They're not paying state, they're not paying local. So how does that 18-year-old know that she or he needs to be paying income tax?
That's where having that information on your website, when people come in to sign up for utilities, handing them a questionnaire, letting them know that they need to complete this so that they can be added to the tax register. Once a year, we go through the state list and we compare anybody who filed a state tax return using an address in Riverside with our database, and we capture people that way. So we're making sure we pick them up. So there are multiple ways that it happens, but it starts with making sure you have good information on your website and information available when people come in the door.
We also are in the process of evaluating things like business licensing programs that would create touch points for us with the business community to make sure that employers are withholding. So it's kind of the counterfactual to the scenario
Employers have to withhold residential income tax. It's a courtesy if they want to do, employment
opposite,
income
yeah.
tax. It's a courtesy if they want to do residential. So they're not statutorily obligated to
Correct.
do the courtesy withholding, courtesy.
Right, but just to say that there are multiple ways, multiple venues that we can try to bring this to people's attention.
Right.
Depending on the circumstances they're in. So.
And in the scenario I've mentioned, I don't know if an 18-year-old's going to know to go to their city's website, especially if they're not thinking about this. The foresight isn't there. And you said you have a list of people who filed taxes. How long does that take for that person to get notified? Like, hey, you didn't file your taxes, and is that notice that they're getting coming with a penalty or no?
Once we get the state list, we run a comparison to our database to find people who have not filed a return, and that's when they get a letter from us. But we actually do get a lot of questionnaires that come from the city of Riverside. So somebody is passing those out and making sure that residents are getting that information. We have a lot of our communities who, if you do a utility sign-up, you have to do the registration so that we know that you are here for municipal income tax purposes. So it really is, it's your ordinance and it's your tax, and you are the first line of defense when it comes to making sure if you know about somebody in the community that we know about them.
Is that notice, is that coming with a penalty, or just oh, hey, by the way, you may owe taxes?
There are late filing penalties associated with not filing a return. But a taxpayer who may be moved into the city and didn't know about it, that's a situation where they may be able to request a waiver, which we don't do. That comes back to the city to make that determination.
Kim makes that decision.
Other questions?
I appreciate your time.
Thank you. I appreciate all your
Yeah.
information.
Mike's got a few.
Who gets the penalties and the interest if someone's charged that? Does that,
Riverside.
The city.
the city gets that? Okay. And then, when I used to file RETA, I could do it with TurboTax. I cannot do that with CCA. Are you guys working with TurboTax towards that at all?
That would be a question for our administrator. That may be part of the technology updates that they're working on. But I don't know what that partnership might look like with a software like TurboTax.
I want to challenge that, what you just said, because my most recent time I've used TurboTax, Rita and CCA are both listed
Oh, okay.
as where you could print the form, but
Yep.
you're still filling out the form.
Right, you're still filling out a rate of return as well.
But before, I never could before, so I didn't even look at it this year. And then if someone is getting a refund, how long does it take for them to get that?
As long as we have all of the documentation, and in some cases, that even includes an employer certification, especially if they're claiming that they worked partially in, partially out, there's an employer certification that's required. Once we have everything, and that includes any missing tax filings, any prior year balances are resolved, then those have to be issued within 90 days after all of that completed information is taken
Well,
care
it
of.
took me 6 months.
Do you know which address you mailed it to?
Yeah, I mailed it to the main address, but here's what happened. I
We're not
did it
supposed to talk about
electronically.
personal.
Well,
Yeah,
we're not going to talk about individuals,
Yeah,
even if they're on
this-
council.
Okay.
Yeah,
You can
this
talk
is
about-
confidential information. Please see me in
But
the
it took-
hallway afterwards.
But when you said it was, your main job is customer service, and what we're trying to tell you is, there are problems with the customer service. People's information getting lost, they send their information in, and all of a sudden, and then they call back, and they don't have it, but they sent their W-2s, so now they can't send their W-2s again because they've already sent them. So there's some issues there that you guys just need to look at.
And those are situations where I would encourage you to have that resident or the business, whoever it is, contact us directly so that we can help them through that process.
Other questions for our?
Mine's not a question. I just would like to say, Eric, I have you in my cell phone, and it's the first time I put a face with your name.
Okay.
But I have a different phone number than you're giving out tonight. So I'll get with you before you leave. Make sure I have the right one. And you've been delightful when I've dealt with
Okay.
you on the phone.
Thank you.
I don't know if I have a question. I guess I do. I'm wondering if would it be fair to say that there's the people that are having some trouble with this reporting schedule or the dates that seem to sneak up on them, is there a trend there in that these are people that tend to work at places that don't do courtesy withholding? Are they self-employed? Are there any commonalities that you see across these the folks that are contacting you with issues? And I know that there's certainly some chatter in the community about people being satisfied or dissatisfied with our local municipal tax collection. I certainly hope that there will be more folks here tonight to talk about that. But do you see any commonalities? Is it folks that, we do live next door, or we are next door to a very large community that does not collect income tax? So I can see the scenario that Zach laid out. That could happen. Is it mostly one of anything, or does it cover the spectrum?
It covers the spectrum, but I think some of the commonalities are related to individuals who have balances due for multiple reasons. It could be they have scheduled income, they're self-employed, or they're working in Beaver Creek and there's no tax being taken out and courtesy withholding is not a requirement. Or they work in, even in Fairborn where there's a 2% tax, they owe another 0.5% here. Or they work at the base and they've not signed up for the voluntary allotment. So we see, usually it's those taxpayers that have balances due. Those are the ones we typically see this, and that can be for multiple reasons.
Right. Okay, well, Josh, these two are obviously available when residents need them, and this is an ongoing conversation with the community. Is there anything that you wanted to add as we thank them for their presentation and move along for the folks who might be watching?
No, other than just to thank you both for coming this evening. And I know, as Councilmember Lomach mentioned and others did too, the fact that I think that you're here in person, and we are, especially in the springtime, or in the winter when people are getting ready to file, for April deadlines. That's a tremendous advantage to us as staff as well. And so our goal, our intention is to take the information you've provided tonight and supplement what's already out on our website, and we will be very proactive with your contact information as well as questions come up. So
That
thank you
would be
very much.
wonderful. And if you run across scenarios where you are hearing a lot of the same type of situations, and there's something that we can develop for you to put on your website, maybe some kind of a special article we can create that answers specific questions that you're hearing on a regular basis, let us know. We developed a media packet that we send out annually so that municipalities can put good information on their website. But if you think of anything specific to your community that you think would be helpful, we definitely want to make sure we're developing things for you specifically to put out there so that you can help your residents.
Okay. Well, thank you both for your time this evening, and we certainly appreciate this information, and we look forward to moving on and sharing this with our residents and catering to their specific needs if possible.
Thank you very much.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate the opportunity to come in.
You're leaving cards? Yeah, I have another
Yes.
phone number for you, so
Uh-oh, you
maybe
got-
it's a,
have my personal
You
phone
might
number?
have his personal cell phone number.
Go ahead and read that into
Let's
the
not
minutes.
get that out. Yeah, let's not.
Yeah, let's
start
let's
that.
read
that's
those
the
into the
number I
minutes.
have here at the top. Well, that's okay. Go on with the meeting, Pete.
Okay, I'll go on with the meeting.
It's a-
I think we've all had a minute to.
Move on, Pete.
We've all had a chance to read the meeting minutes from October 10th.
Did we?
And the 17th. I'm sure we've all had
Well,
that.
we switched to public comment next.
Oh, I apologize. We did move that up. Do we have any slips turned in, Madam
You
Clerk?
have no slips.
Okay, so we have no one who is asked to speak on agenda items. So then I will move on to the minutes, of which we have all had a chance to look over the October 10 and October 17 council meeting minutes and work session. Do we have a motion to approve? Move to approve, and a second.
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Joseph and a second from the deputy mayor. All those in favor of approving the minutes as published signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. All right, we'll move right into unfinished business, of which we have two ordinances that are up for their second reading, public hearing, potential adoption. And Mr. Manager, we talked about both of these at length at work sessions and previous meetings. Unless there's anything else you want to add, I'll just start with the first one.
No, there are no changes. The first one is just finalize the sale of the wooded parcel for the Glendine project.
So moved.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion from Mr. Joseph and a second from Ms. Lomash. The city of Riverside allows for an ordinance to be read by title only unless a council member requests otherwise. Madam Clerk, would you please read this ordinance by title only?
Ordinance number 240856, an ordinance declaring city property located on or about Glendine Avenue, parcel ID number I390011000006, to no longer be needed for municipal purposes and to be surplus, and authorizing the city manager to execute documents necessary to sell said property and declaring an emergency.
Is this an emergency if we're on the second reading?
What this means is that once you pass
It's
it,
a-
you don't have the
it's
30-day
effective.
wait.
Thank you.
Okay,
That's
thank you.
And we did have your question was?
When will this development be ready to live in?
I don't have a firm timeline on that, but
Approximate is all I'm asking.
But my understanding is that the next step would be, we would discuss incentives with the developer, and assuming that that conversation proceeds constructively, then I know the developer's anxious to move as quickly as possible, but I don't know exactly when.
With that being said, I will open the public hearing for ordinance 24-0-856 at 7:02 PM. If anyone here wishes to speak on that ordinance, please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes. Seeing no one come forward and hearing no one, I will close the public hearing for ordinance 24-0-856 at 7:02 PM. Is there any further discussion from members of council?
I do have, so Josh, does he have to go back to the planning commission with new plans, or is that all done?
I believe his plans have been finalized through planning commission. This was one component of the project. The next component that is part of the MOU that council approved at the last meeting is really the incentives piece. That's the largest pin in this conversation, if you will, that has to be worked through.
Okay.
If there's no further comment from members of council, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Ms. Lomax?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Denning?
Yes.
Ms. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Maxfield?
Yes.
Mayor Williams?
Yes. And the second ordinance, ordinance 24-0-857. Mr. Manager, a brief roundup of this.
This is the second reading of the ordinance that frees up some of our fund balance reserves to proceed with repairs for the Right Point buildings.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Joseph and a second from Mr. Denning. City charter allows for an ordinance to be read by title only unless a council member requests otherwise. Madam Clerk, would you please read this ordinance by title only?
Ordinance number 240857, an ordinance to make supplemental appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures of the city of Riverside, state of Ohio, for the period of January 1 through December 31st, 2024.
I will now open the public hearing for ordinance 24-0-857 at 7:04 PM. If you wish to speak on this ordinance, please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes. Hearing no one and seeing no one come forward, I will close the public hearing for ordinance 24-0-857 at 7:04 PM. Is there any further discussion from members of council? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Mr. Denning?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Fry?
Yes.
Ms. Lomach?
Yes.
Mr. Maxfield?
Yes.
Mayor Williams?
Yes. We'll move into new business, of which we have 2 resolutions. Mr. Manager, the first one is Project Share.
That's an annual gift that council has traditionally given in an amount of $250.
Motion to-
Second.
We have a motion from Ms. Lomach and a second from the Deputy Mayor. All those in favor of Resolution 24-R-2986 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. And the second resolution, 24-R-2987, Mr. Manager, this is for Right Point.
Correct. This authorizes me to sign the contract to conduct the Right Point project repairs. Mr. Valquette is in attendance. If any of you have questions for either me or him, we're happy to address those.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Joseph and a second from Mr. Denning. All those in favor of Resolution 24-R-2987 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Sorry, Keith, we didn't have any questions for you. Waited this whole time.
Higher time.
Fill out a slip, you can talk.
I think if you want to go back and get your CPA, I think that counted for CPE credits.
That's an hour.
I know.
Solid hour. We'll move on to public comment for non-agenda items. I'll ask the clerk at this time if there's any slips turned in for public comment on non-agenda items.
There are none.
There are none. We'll move on to the ever-popular, always brief, city manager report.
I do have one, and it is brief. I do want to thank the residents for their voter approval of our police renewal levy. That is a very important funding stream for our police department, and it provides us with the ability to budget more reliably over the next 5 years. As we discussed at the last budget workshop, and again at work sessions in the summer months this year, although that renewal has gone through, we do continue to have operating revenue shortfalls. We will get into the weeds on some of that at next week's budget workshop. Unfortunately, I have not been in a position to provide you with a budget that has been balanced as far as operations go. We've deficit spent every year. That is likely to continue. That's part of the conversation that we'll have.
Every year we've been a city.
Every year, well, the last 3 years since I've been here, I should clarify. We do have several years to figure this out, but I do want to continue to repeat the things that we've been discussing, which are that, basically the revenue streams that we have coming in are not sufficient to cover our day-to-day operations. That's something that we talked about in the last budget and when Shared Resource Center was here in June, giving us a forecast. I will say we are in a much better position now to understand our finances, where our money is coming from and where it's going, and how the impact of the income tax that was passed in 2021 is helping to support our operations. So I feel very confident that we will be able to constructively address this problem, and we have time to do that. But at the same time, just wanted to remind folks that there is a broader conversation that will occur, and we'll start that, well, actually, I won't say we'll start it, we'll continue it next week. And that's all I have.
And there will be a pretty large budget discussion in the next few council meetings and work sessions. Is that fair to say, if anybody's watching or in attendance tonight, to know about that process?
Yes, next week's work session is 90% budget focused. So at that point, I intend to walk everybody through the draft budget. We will actually go through I'll pull up in ClearGov what the draft budget will look like, and we can kind of go through section by section so that what you're looking at is exactly what I'll ask you to adopt as an attachment in addition to the usual budget ordinance. And then assuming that there are no major deviations from the overall budget strategy, we would look at a first reading November 21st and a second reading at the first meeting in December. I believe that's the 5th. And at that point, the budget would be adopted. We do still have time, so if there are additional conversations that need to happen, we could do both readings in December, so we have some buffer to carry a conversation if we need to.
Okay. Any questions for the manager on his weekly report, or somewhat weekly report? Okay, we will move on to council member comments, and I will start with Ms. Lomach.
Yes, I would like to remind everybody about Hometown Holiday this weekend at the Stebbins parking lot at 2 to 6, honoring veterans, and we encourage any veterans that are out there to show up to be honored at 2:15. Tree lighting is 6 o'clock in front of the high school, and there are going to be multiple food trucks available, so come hungry. So I hope people will come. I would like to personally thank Officer Toscani for his leadership in promoting getting the work done. I won't say promoting, that's not what I meant. Getting the work done necessary, and thank him for his efforts off time, off duty, getting signs out, and the Chamber of Commerce for their support of the levy in purchasing the door hangers. I think we need to say thank you formally as a group for their support. And I'm very disappointed the school levy didn't pass. It appears that the intent at this point is to return in March.
All right, we'll move on to Mr. Brown.
Okay. I do got a few things. First and foremost, for this coming holiday, this coming Monday, I do want to say Happy Veterans Day to all of our veterans and their families. Thank you so much for your sacrifice. Appreciate it very much. We love you, and because of that, it allows us to live in the greatest country in the world. So appreciate, or the greatest, yes, the greatest country in the world. So
Thank you.
yeah, sure. And secondly, regarding the elections this past Tuesday, Riverside did have a very nice turnout. 60%, I heard, of the registered voters did turn out and cast a ballot, which was about 9,100 of our citizens, so we appreciate that. And, you know, presidential elections, we all know, can be very divisive from a lot of people. A lot of people lose, unfortunately, I don't want to say lose, but, you know, a lot at odds with friends and family and coworkers and stuff like that. And you know, at the end of the day, whether if you're a Republican or Democrat or independent or whatever you classify as yourself, the bottom line is we're all Americans. And Americans work the best together when they can reach across those lines and come together for the common good. So hope to see a lot of that coming up here in the next coming months and years. And speaking of working together, haven't seen a better example of it than since I started on this council. I know there's a lot of backgrounds and a lot of different ideologies on this council, and I appreciate very much our ability to be able to do that. And I should also note that it was 1 year ago today that I was actually elected to this council, and I don't take that lightly. I'm blessed to be able to do it, and I want to personally thank Katie, Mike, Brenda, Jesse, Pete, Zach, Sarah, and Josh for all of your help in this first year. I've learned a lot. Still got a lot more to learn, but in the next 3 years, and Lord willing, and the creek don't rise many years after that, hope to be able to just continue on with the process and be here with it. So I appreciate all you guys. God bless you guys, and God bless America, and God bless Riverside. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Joseph.
Andy, I share a similar sentiment that you do. And time again, we've all expressed this, that we appreciate that we keep national politics out of the decision-making of this board. All of us stepped here to serve not as members of a political party, but as representatives of our community. Yet, it is hard to ignore what has inundated our lives over the last 48 hours. And I've been thinking a lot about a quote from former President Barack Obama. He said, "The struggles of a textile worker in Spartanburg are not so different than the plight of a dishwasher in Las Vegas, that the hopes of the little girl who goes to the crumbling school in Dillon are the same as the dreams of the boy who learns in the streets of LA. We'll remember that there's something happening in America, that we are not as divided as our politics suggest, that we are one people, that we are one nation. At its core, Riverside is a working class community. Whether you're a Republican or Democrat, the challenges that we face are remarkably similar. We all feel the pinch at the gas pump. We all feel the strain of spending more while bringing home less groceries. We all worry about the safety of our children, of the children in our families when they go to school. More so, we all aspire to the same ideals, the fundamental rights of Americans of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But too often, we're told a different story. News organizations and special interest groups spend millions of dollars to convince us otherwise. And unfortunately, what we've all been witnessing is it can work. These organizations thrive on division, amplifying our differences, and instead of highlighting the values that we share as a country and as a community. This afternoon, I came across a post on a Facebook community group here in Dayton, and it read, "What time do we start rounding up the gays and the
This
Jews?"
isn't appropriate.
I'll read it again. What time do we start rounding up the gays and the Jews? Let me be clear. This kind of hate has no place in our community or any community.
He needs to go.
But what alarms me is the fact that someone felt so emboldened to post something like that publicly. We must confront the reality that moments like this stem from an environment where division and fear have been allowed to grow and take root. But here in Riverside, we have a power to take a stand and say no, say hell no. Not here, not in our city. We can choose to reject hate and division outright. I'm aware that I'm simply one of 7 on this council, but after working with the 7 of us, or 6 of you all, for the last 3 years, I know this. No matter your race, religion, sexual orientation, or political beliefs, that this city will do everything in its power to protect you and your family. Hate and bigotry will never find refuge in this city. I'll close with one more quote, this one from President John F. Kennedy. "Let us not aspire, but act. Let us not seek the Republican or the Democratic answer, but the right answer. Let us not seek to fix blame for the past. Let us accept our own responsibility for the future." Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. Andy, when you mentioned Veterans Day, it triggered in my mind that I've been able to attend a Veterans Day parade out at the Dayton VA. And in fact, I ran into Keith about a month and a half ago at an unveiling of a beautiful statue of President Lincoln. And it is one of one. There's probably 10,000 statues or more of Abraham Lincoln in our country. The one at the VA that was unveiled in September is him signing the executive order on March 3rd, 1865, 5 weeks before he was assassinated, that created the VA. And the central branch, which we know is the Dayton VA, was the largest one in the country that was formed in 1867. And I think about how beautiful that statue is. I get to go out there on Saturday for a Veterans Parade. And what I thought about the last 48 hours was that, as Abraham Lincoln said, we are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies, though passions may be strained. It must not break our bonds of affection. And I'll just close his thought with, we must surely appeal to the better angels of our nature. And I think Andy and Zach already said it. There's 7 of us up here. We all have different views on many different things. But we appeal to the better angels of our nature for our city and the decisions we make. And I hope, even if it's on a small level, when I talk to my sons about political differences, I like to talk about this group of people who get things done. Jesse.
Well,
Which president are you going to quote? Woodrow Wilson? Don't do that one.
no. I just want to say, obviously, Veterans Day is Monday. Thank you, all the veterans. Obviously, it wasn't for all the veterans out there, we wouldn't have a nation, have a country.
We couldn't debate all this stuff.
No, we couldn't. We wouldn't. None of us would be here. So, so please please remember that on Monday. Zach, thank you for your service. We
Yeah,
appreciate
absolutely.
that. But that's really all I got.
Brenda?
Couple things. So, looking over the election results from Tuesday, I noticed that our levy renewal passed by a very slim margin, much slimmer than the charter amendments.
Absolutely.
Which was surprising, given that some of the charter amendments were not broadly supported. I point that out because taking that result with the result at the top of the ticket together, the message that I am receiving is that people are struggling financially. This renewal was not asking for more money, and yet they weren't really sure that it was a very slim margin. I think that's important for us to consider as we try to figure out how to do what we need to do to keep the city running. And I'm grateful for the people that did pass it, because the safety of our police officers depend on it. And related to the economic reality, I am disappointed in the outcome of the presidential election. I understand the economic reality. But I don't believe that we have to choose between economic stability and civility and human dignity. I think most people, most Americans want all of that. And yet, we have, as Zach mentioned, the excesses of people wanting to round up the gays and the Jews. On Texas State campus today, I think it was, or yesterday, I'm not sure which day it was, there was protesting with signs that said women are property. There are people who are scared. They don't know whether this government is going to protect them. I'm thinking about my own experiences as a child, about the bullying that I encountered, about the rocks thrown at my head by the boys in my class. And when I talk to my daughter, she says that it's not like it was in the 80s, that the bullying is not like that. And I hope and pray that we can keep that our children don't have to endure what those of us in earlier generations endured. I don't know if our government at the national level is going to be able to protect everyone the way they deserve to be protected. But similar to what you were saying, Zach, at this level, no matter what is happening at the national level, we have a responsibility to each other to protect each other. And what that means is standing up, regardless of whether you voted Democrat or Republican, standing up and saying, no, this will not happen in my presence. Being the person who interrupts the violence when it comes, and saying, not here, not in my community, and really building those structures within our community to protect people. I think that our community is capable and and is willing, and I just ask that we come together to do that.
Thank you, Brenda. And Mr. Denning.
Couple of things. Thank all the veterans. Thank you, Zach, for your service. If you notice, at least on the north side of town, the flags have starting to go up for Veterans Day. The rest should be out tomorrow. And I just think it's great that our community participates in that and shows, and the flag is red, white, and blue. It's not red, it's not blue. It's red, white, and blue, and I think that's what we need to think about. We're one country. This is the way, we are a democratic republic. We elect people to represent us as part of the government, just like we do locally. Each of us represents 25,000 people, and we try and do our best to do what's best for the majority of those people. We had 9,000 people vote, and if you go by the numbers, about 48% of them and about 52% of them were different parties, but we represent all of them, and we do that as the best we can. And I honestly believe that the best place to be in government, be a representative, is at the local level. That's where we can do the most good and be the most positive for our community. And that's where we can decide what's best for our community. We don't live in California. We don't live in Oregon. We don't live in Washington. We live in Riverside, and we will do what's best for our community. And we're the ones that have to make those decisions. And we may not agree, but once we make that decision, once at least four of us say that's the way we're going to go, then when the rest of us just jump on board, and that's what we do. And I think that's great, and I think I just wish Washington worked that well together. It's not that, if it's not our idea, we're not going to vote for it. It's what's the best answer. So I'm going to quote John F. Kennedy. Ask not what your country or city, in this case, can do for you. Ask what you can do for your city or country. And the best thing you can do is just come together and make things happen for each other and not worry about the noise in the other part. The other thing I want to remember Hometown Holiday on Saturday. Santa Claus is supposed to appear at 2 o'clock. And then the fire truck tour is December 10th and 11th.
Mike, maybe you can make it this year.
Huh.
You should try to mark your calendar now if you know the dates.
I've
and we
got
don't miss
previous commitment.
All right, but I mean, every year you miss it and we feel terrible.
I know, but
Sir.
I think we'll keep an eye on people, though.
So
I think
December
it's
10th and
great.
11th.
I think this makes our community stronger, and I think people really enjoy it. I'm sure the fire department will be putting the map out and approximate times like we did last year. That worked real well. I'm hoping the weather holds out the way it is, the way it's been lately, and we don't have a major snowstorm like they're having in Colorado. So,
Did you have something else on?
Well, I wasn't going to go political tonight, but since others have chosen to do so, I would like to simply say that I'm disappointed that in this country, women get no respect. And I have 4 brothers, all who have served their country. I served my country 37 years. Nobody ever says thank you. I moved 11 times. My father told me when I was young that I could be as good as my brothers. And I've worked hard to be as good as my brothers. but nobody ever recognized, and I'm sorry that the men of this country cannot elect a woman. Thank you.
Sarah, I'll go out on a limb. You're not as good as your brothers. You're better. How many years have you served this community? Just this community, how many years?
40 years.
40 years. Yeah, I wouldn't worry about you being better, being as good as your brothers. I think it's
That's
the other way
not the
around.
point I wanted to make.
I realize.
But also, at 14 years old, I had a elderly uncle come on to me because he liked the sundress I had on. So I have a lot of inward reasons why I can't respect somebody who does those things to women.
I think one thing I want to say, and I'd be remiss if I left this meeting without saying it. Did your spouse retire from the military?
Military and civilian, 37 years we served.
So during his retirement ceremony, did you also walk down with him? No?
Nope.
But in the Navy, there's a tradition.
Well, that's changed
yeah.
since 98.
Yeah, in the Navy, there's a tradition that upon the retirement of a sailor, his spouse also retires. There's a tradition, they blow a whistle, you salute coming aboard, you salute going to shore, and for the last time, the sailor leaving is going to shore for the final time. But it's not just about the service member. It's about their
Family.
spouse.
Family.
Their spouse gets saluted by a
They
line
serve-
of sailors
they
on
serve
both
too.
sides, their family, the children, so.
But you're
Sarah,
talking about a different generation.
I understand,
This
but
retirement took place in 98.
but I want you to
And
know
things have changed.
that, like, I see that. I think, I know there's a lot of people that do see the sacrifices that military spouses put in, but I mean, you and I, Sarah, you know more than anything that I understand what you're saying, and just, it's not, your
Well, my
emotions are in a
main
very
point
targeted
is
place.
that I
very
hope
good place.
sometime this country can realize and men can vote for a woman to have a job of
Amen.
leadership.
Amen.
Because that's not happening in this country. And I will not believe that the election went any reason because of that.
All right, well, we'll adjourn at 7:31. Madam Clerk, thank you, and hope to see